Welcome to More Than Words, a podcast about treating the whole child brought to you by the Reading and Language Learning Center. I'm your host, Tristen, and today I'm joined by Kim Hiday and Rachel Saulle from McLean Speech and Language to discuss auditory processing. Hi, folks. How are you guys?
Doing good. How are you?
Good.
Doing well, thanks.
Yay. We're excited for you guys to be here. This is going to be such an interesting discussion. Auditory processing, as not an SLP, I don't know a ton about this, so I'm very intrigued to learn more.
Happy to help. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's start with introductions. Can you guys tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do? And I think if it's okay, we'll start with Kim.
Sure. My name is Kim Hiday. I've been an SLP for over 30 years. I purchased McLean Speech and Language in 2016, although I began working there the year before. I started off in the hospital systems, was 14 years, and then my husband and I moved overseas. And I've done everything from Operation Smile to private practice to working in the American schools in London and Paris.
Oh my gosh, how fun.
Yeah, it's been a journey. When I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, I started working for Fairfax County because I had 3 young children and quickly realized it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Went back to school, got another degree in special education, got a PhD in reading disabilities, and in the process of doing that, started working at McLean Speech. The owner asked me the year after I started whether I wanted to buy the practice or she was going to shut the doors, and I took a leap of faith.
Wow. How exciting and cool.
It has been a journey that I did not expect. It was not on my bingo card. So I was introduced to auditory integration therapy actually when I was living in London. I had 2 students that went through the program, thought it was a bunch of voodoo magic, went to the person who did their process, and I saw such a marked difference. I shadowed her for about 2 weeks and still was not 100% convinced. We moved to the Philippines after London, and then we ended up in Northern Virginia. And it just so happened that the owner at that time of McLean Speech and Language had also been trained on auditory integration therapy by Guy Berard, who is the founder. And I decided to go back to the woman in London to be officially trained and certified.
Oh my gosh.
And the person in London, Pauline, is still providing services. So she and I talk regularly. We exchange data, and she's amazing.
Oh, how cool.
So it fits in well because all of our therapists are Orton Gillingham trained on the reading program. I'm also Wilson trained. We integrate myofunctional therapy into this that helps us with phonemic awareness and articulation. And yeah, the last thing I would say is recently 2 of us have been trained on the Buffalo model so that our continuing services for auditory processing disorders does not stop with just having AIT.
Oh, how cool. Like you said, a journey, and what a fun story. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And Rachel, I would love to hear from you too. Tell us a little bit more about you.
I'm Rachel Saulle. I have been an SLP for almost 7 years, and I have been at McLean Speech for all of that time, and then some. I actually started at McLean Speech when I was still in grad school, and I am now co-director at McLean Speech. I have worked in clinical school settings with children, adults, all of the areas of speech and language world. I have a certification in autism spectrum disorders, and I'm trained, as Kim said, in Orton Gillingham. I'm also trained to provide myofunctional therapy, trained in Berard auditory integration training. I also went to London to become trained in AIT, which was a fantastic experience. As Kim said, Pauline was trained by Guy Berard himself, and so we're getting that direct training down the line. Which very, very cool. And I also can provide treatment using the Buffalo model.
Wow. I mean, I cannot believe that you guys had, like you said, such a direct link to the Berard auditory integration training, which I'm like very interested to learn more about as we like get further into this. But what cool experiences. Again, thank you guys for being here. And in your name, you kind of give away where you are, but can you tell us where people can find you guys, where you're located? And then if they're looking to find you online, where would they go?
There are actually a few ways to find us. The easiest way is online. So you can just go to McLeanspeech.com. You'll find all of our contact information, including an email, phone number, and a form that you can fill out to contact us. You can also find us on social media, Instagram at McLean Speech, Facebook, McLean Speech and Language. And if you are looking to come into our office, our main office is located in McLean, which makes sense. But we also see clients in Annandale, and we have select availability in Vienna as well.
Awesome. Well, it's perfect. So I'll add that to the show notes so people can find you online and then, of course, in person. And if you guys are ready, I want to hop into all of the details of auditory processing.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, Kim, to start us off, can you tell us a little bit more about what the term auditory processing actually means and how is it different from like hearing ability?
That's a great question because people often say, I mishear people or I don't hear people. We kind of think of it as an ear versus the brain juxtaposition. Hearing is when the ears detect sound, and auditory processing is what happens once the information actually reaches the brain. At that point, your brain interprets the auditory input and then organizes it, and that's how we get expressive language or speech or understanding of it. There are a few different skills, such as discrimination, memory, sequencing, and understanding speech in noise. The auditory system is largely cross-wired, meaning each ear sends stronger signals to the opposite side of the brain via the hippocampus and the corpus callosum in the middle of your brain. Language processing, however, is primarily lateralized to the left side of the brain. So when we're listening to speech, information coming in through the right ear has a more direct pathway to the left hemisphere, which is why you'll sometimes hear about a right ear advantage, which has nothing to do with handedness.
Wow.
That said, both ears and both sides of the brain are always working together, but we will always pay attention to whether or not a person has an advantage to one side or the other, especially when we're making recommendations either in the classroom or for adults, what ear to possibly occlude if you're sitting at a dinner party, like people you should be sitting next to, and something as simple as sitting at a round table versus a square table.
This is like blowing my mind. Like I understand where literacy is, like you said, lateralized in the left side of the brain, but I don't know that I ever thought about the way that you hear also getting to one side of the brain and which side you're hearing on being better to like get the language into the brain and process. Like that is so crazy to me.
I was just going to say, I think we'll probably discuss this later, but one of the key features that Rachel and I see are like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you'll be like, wait a minute.
Similarly to our LLC, a lot of our clients have dyslexia or literacy needs. And I have told parents, it'll be probably one day after we're all long gone, there will be research that comes out, I think, just anecdotally based on what I've seen on this ear advantage and language and literacy, particularly dyslexia. We have found that a lot of our clients that come in with a reading deficit, whether it's diagnosed as dyslexia or they have phonological awareness difficulties as a young child, they often are left ear dominant or have a left ear advantage.
Wow.
And so, again, there's not that I have read any formal links.
Scientific evidence,
but anecdotally, I think there's a link there just based off of what we've seen.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. Thank you for getting into the nitty gritty. Sometimes it's like fun to hear all the crazy science of things.
It's really difficult to explain. So I'm glad we're doing this. When we test children, we always have a parent in the room with us.
Yeah.
So they don't think we're just making this up. And we will go over the information on the spot. And 99% of the time they will say, can my spouse call you? Because I don't even know how to explain this.
Yeah.
Or they say, can you test me too?
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Rachel, like, what are some of the signs that might suggest a child is struggling with auditory processing? And what do the parents often notice first?
Another really good question. So, a lot of our clients that come to us have the same first complaint. And like Kim said, a lot of times they'll say they're not listening or they're not hearing. And that is a child or even an adult who is often saying, "What?" or "Huh?" Especially if there are multiple step directions. Or they are saying what or huh, and then about 3 seconds later answering the question.
Right.
A delay. We might also have some kids that are mishearing similar sounding words, and they might have some auditory sensitivity that can really be debilitating. We've had clients that things like the tap when the faucet is on, that sound of
Oh,
water will cause them to run out of the room. Or we've had clients that the cafeteria at school was genuinely unbearable to the point where
yeah.
it was causing complete meltdowns before they even left the classroom because they knew what was coming next.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we get those basic areas that we're like, ooh, that sounds, maybe there's an auditory processing need going on. Sometimes we hear from teachers or parents that the child's not paying attention and they are thinking that maybe there is an attention-based difficulty.
Right.
Sometimes it's true. Sometimes they might not be processing auditory information. So they are getting just, 10 minutes into a lesson in class, their auditory system is tapped out. So they're going to zone out and do whatever else for the
Wow.
30 minutes. We've also had families that will avoid specific events or places, birthday parties even, because they know that the sound sensitivities have caused just too much difficulty for their child. Another common one is children who have had their hearing tested many times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, they'll call and they'll say they're not listening, they can't hear. And they come in with all of these different audiometric testing. They're hearing perfectly fine. And then as we
Wow.
ask more and more questions, we find that these kids are exhausted by the end of the school day. They're working extra hard to listen, extra hard to pay attention, not just in class, but even in social conversation. And we see the same with
Yeah.
adults. We have adults who come in and their partner, spouse, whoever is saying they don't ever listen, or they're finding that they're having a hard time keeping up at work and especially in big meetings. And they're also exhausted by the end of the day.
Yeah.
We had an
Wow.
adult recently who was a nurse, and her dream was to be a ICU nurse, and she was
Yeah.
on her rotation. Like that means you get paired with another nurse's schedule, and you're on same schedule ICU.
Yeah.
She only had 8 rooms. She could not tell where the beep was coming from. And in a
Oh my
situation
gosh.
like that, that's life or death.
Yes.
And the other issue she had was she was unable to perceive what was being said by the accents from the physicians.
Oh, wow.
And she came to us in desperation.
Yeah.
She went through our program, made a huge difference.
Wow.
We also had an uptick in adults right around 2021.
Yes.
Oh,
People had moved to remote work, and a lot of times
Right.
cameras were on. They're in a Zoom meeting with all of these different people, and
yeah.
come to find out they had been relying so heavily their entire lives on watching people's mouths and using
Yeah.
cues to help them process auditory information. And when all of that was removed, they were really struggling at work. We've had clients come to us because they're on a PIP, on a performance
Oh
intervention.
my gosh.
Yeah. It's been a
Wow.
lot for adults, and when you dig into their history, they will say to you, it has been happening for decades. They just thought it was
Right.
their quirkiness. For children, they come in, a lot of them typically have an ADHD diagnosis, and it's the number one misdiagnosis of auditory processing disorders, and anxiety. And the anxiety is
Wow.
the nervousness from not being able to perceive what's going to happen next.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine because there's someone close to me that has a hard time with the hearing ability piece of things, right? And like it was a lot for them to keep up in meetings, and they felt like they always had to say what, to the point where they were like, well, I just couldn't hear, so I'm just like not going to ask anymore. And so they just missed like half the conversation. It was very frustrating for them. And so obviously theirs was for the hearing ability. They've got hearing aids. They feel so much better now. I cannot imagine an auditory processing thing. You must feel like a little bit bonkers to have gone through a bunch of hearing testing, be like, your hearing is fine, and not realize like, no, it's the way that you're processing the information that is like not getting exactly there for you, that you just need a bit of help on. So what great work you're doing.
We just had an adult come in last week. Over the last, I think it was 5 years, she had gone to 3 different audiologists. And the reason why is because her husband kept saying, there must be a hearing issue, and they're not figuring it out.
Wow.
She 51, I think. Mm-hmm. She was just slightly over 50. Classroom assistant, so an instructional aide.
Oh.
And she said this year she noticed it was significantly worse. So we dove into it, like, why?
Right.
Kids were younger. They were all kindergartners. Teacher was young. So a very high-pitched voice and speaks at rapid bursts.
Yeah.
She was unable to follow what the teacher was saying. She had no idea how to direct the kids. And she just happened to go to this third audiologist who said, I think you need an auditory processing test.
Wow.
And sure enough, she failed it.
Oh my gosh.
So with adults, we go into the process a little bit different when we're recommending things, but it's still there. Like we have a lot of the recommendations that are similar. We just try to morph it first for the adults before we go directly into treatment.
Yeah.
I have learned a lot about myself too.
Oh, yeah.
I was a child who was super bothered by auditory information, and I've been able to connect with some of these clients, especially the adults. Sometimes for some of them, it's emotional because it's the first time that they actually felt like they're being heard. I was, in my family, I have a younger brother, and the way that he chewed, I couldn't stand it. And so as a child, I would get in trouble all the time because I would leave the table or I would start an argument, and it was, you're always being so mean to your brother. Stop being so mean to your brother. And there were certain other sounds, silverware, certain sounds, I would leave the room. And it would, emotionally, I would be so upset. I would be angry. And I think back and like, oh my gosh, I was one of these children with a hypersensitivity. I was so auditorily overstimulated.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating to learn and think, oh, this happens way more often than people realize.
Wow. Yeah. So where does the speech language pathologist fit into all of this? So a child comes to you, or it could be an adult, either way, we can talk about both, comes to you with auditory processing challenges. What role does the SLP play in like supporting all of these folks?
So the SLP has a really important role in the field, but with restrictions and limitations. We are not legally allowed to diagnose CAP or CPD, but we usually do it in conjunction with an audiologist.
Okay.
Most audiologists, unless you're dual certified, also feel the same way. And all the audiologists that we partner with will not diagnose it unless we confirm on our end.
Wow.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
It's a tag team approach.
It completely is, which is really good because it should be a team approach to get what's best for a client.
Yeah.
And it is rare to find someone that is dual certified as well.
Yeah.
So we tell parents that we can provide an evaluation to determine if there is an auditory processing challenges. And in our office, we complete the scan 3C for children, 3A for adults, or there's another more extensive test called the MAPA 2. These tests are to determine how an individual is processing auditory information monoaurally, so one ear at a time, or dichotically, both ears. It's very similar to when you go to the eye doctor, they have you cover one eye and then the other eye, and then they say, okay, both eyes. We don't hear, listen, process monoaurally. We usually do it dichotically, but we have to look at both ears individually first to look at their actual auditory processing for sounds to see if there's an imbalance. And then we also do a audiogram. So we do audiometric testing two threshold, and that means two negative numbers. And as Rachel was saying earlier, to see if there are any hearing sensitivities.
Right.
Unlike an audiologist who usually only does 8 frequencies, we do 11.
Oh,
So we
wow.
usually start at 250 and we go all the way up to 8,000.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it's to see if there's any hypo or hypersensitivities or any evidence that the hearing by itself might be playing a role in the issues.
Wow. So once the difficulties are identified, what are the therapy approaches or other supports? Because I think you guys mentioned like you try to give some variations to adults before you go directly into therapy. So what are some of those supports and approaches and therapies that can help make a difference?
Yeah, so in terms of children, we are pretty heavily involved by recommending accommodations, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more later, but also direct intervention. So we will not only provide auditory integration training, so Burrard auditory integration training, which we recommend if it is indicated by testing, but we also will provide parts of the Buffalo model, so phonemic training, phonemic synthesis, words and noise. But we also will work on just general speech and language strategies. So sequencing, use of transition words and listening for transition words, story retell, any of those areas that are common to a lot of SLPs also support these kids with auditory processing deficits. And like Kim was saying, sometimes when we're sending a kid out for testing, we will directly tell the family, do you need a formal diagnosis? If you don't need it in your family, we can tell you whether or not there's a need. And if there's a need, we can support your child.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that we try to tell families too, is that our goal is not to give a label or find out what diagnostically is going on, but what can we do to help this child or this adult based on what we see and what they're presenting with. As for adults, it depends on their age, what our recommendations will be. We have had adults come to us in their 80s, and Kim and I are like, listen, you've made it 80 years. What strategies can we give you at this point? We don't want to reinvent everything for you.
Yeah.
So we also heavily individualize our recommendations, whether it's for a child or an adult, whatever makes the most sense for their life.
Yeah, with our adults, it's interesting because a lot of times, as Rachel was saying, when we sit down with them and we start asking them about their day, they will tell us about how they modify it.
Wow.
And we'll say, yeah, that's a good idea. And then what we'll also see is they put it on their social life, not only on work life. And so what they're doing is isolating themselves a lot.
Yeah.
So we try to give them strategies, put it in place first before we recommend therapy.
Right.
But even someone who goes through Burrard integration therapy, we also do follow-up therapy because no matter what your age, you've had these learned habits to either avoid certain sounds or to acquire certain things. And so we are trying to modify all of that.
Yeah.
That and nothing in our world, as you know, can be, quote, cured. There is no cure. There are treatments, training programs, therapy, but the biggest thing that we can do is give strategies and build on whatever benefits are gained those therapies and treatment programs.
Yeah. And I think you guys mentioning, all of the adults that have come to you, it really speaks to the fact that like you've gone a long way to like learn how to deal with this up till whatever point, right? And we've all seen this with dyslexia too, right? Kids will get to about third grade and you're like, oh, you've been doing great. Like you're even surpassing your peers in this and that and that and this. And then third grade hits and you've got to, read to learn instead of learning to read. And they've all of a sudden hit this wall. So it's interesting to hear like how you guys offer strategies first before like diving straight into therapy, because like people are capable to, put in those strategies and put in some work in ways that might be more immediately helpful than having to dive straight into therapy. But all that to say, I would love to learn about the Burrard auditory integration training. And if you have a little info on it, maybe the Buffalo model too, because I am unfamiliar with that. So I don't know if, Kim, you want to give us some details on either of
Sure.
those.
Burrard AIT is a listening-based intervention that was developed by Guy Burrard. I don't know if you've noticed his name, but he's just French. He developed the program, gosh, I think it was in the 30s. It was originally designed for a specific client of his who, and a lot of our students present with this too, had more behavior issues than actually academic issues. The academic issues, I should say, were almost secondary to the behaviors.
Yeah.
And it involves listening to music that is modulated based on parameters we set, which could hit any of the frequencies, 250 through 8,000. And we determine during testing. If there are auditory imbalances, we might make one earphone music come out louder than the other. If we have concerns about certain frequencies being way above other frequencies, we call it squash the frequencies by turning those off.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a huge commitment because it's 2 30-minute listening sessions per day over 10 consecutive days.
Oh, wow.
But when you get to day 5 or day 6, you're like, oh my gosh, I got 5 left or 4 left. So we always have a little party for whomever does it at the end. Yeah. But it is pretty intense. And 10 consecutive days. So sometimes we show up in our sweatpants on a Sunday morning. For adults, we've had them come in starting after work, which means there has to be a 3-hour window between your first treatment and second. So a couple of our adults would come in at 5 and then back at 9. And then we would do the whole process the next day again. And then the weekends weren't as intense. But the goal, obviously, is to improve sound tolerance and reduce auditory sensitivities and enhance auditory processing abilities. There are a variety of resources available about auditory processing disorders, and we encourage all of our clients and families to do their own research to determine if it's a fit for them. We also pair them up with other families that have gone through the program or adults to discuss their experience, whether they thought it was beneficial,
right?
What the downsides to 10 days are, because again, it can be long,
right?
And then we recommend things to support individuals with these challenges as well, which is what we already talked about. Everything from a round table to a square table, sitting in booths instead of in the middle of the restaurant, to if you are not right ear dominant, we ask that at least for an hour or two a day, you have a speaker sit on your right side to try to balance it out a little bit more and to make that right ear more dominant. So there's a lot of different techniques. As Rachel was talking about our clients that were on Zoom, we recommended that they essentially put a carpet in the room, maybe some drapes, headphones only, not just the computer screen talking at them.
Yeah.
Everything to absorb the sound instead of having it bounce around.
Yeah. And you said a square table versus a round table. Which one is better? And for people with auditory processing?
The round table is better just because you can move towards a person to close the proximity. Whereas if you have a squared table, it dominates and makes you have a position.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
It also, you have more visual cues with a round table. You can see everybody around a round table, whereas a square table, you sometimes, especially a long rectangular table, there may be somebody talking down the same row as you and you cannot see
can't see them. Yeah.
Same cameras on, trying to just give the visual cues. We will also emphasize to teachers, make sure if you're teaching phonics that the student can see your mouth. So that's a strategy that we'll teach as well.
For adults or children, we also recommend to stay away from certain type of restaurants.
Yeah.
Because that can, affect social skills. So restaurants, I'm not going to name names, but restaurants that have an open ceiling
Oh,
or
sure.
are very basic without a lot of cushy furniture will have sound just bouncing everywhere. You go to high-end restaurants like Capitol Grill or Jay Gilbert's, and they are all designed to be sound absorbing, and you pay for it, and with the food, but they have booths, they have carpets, they have heavy, heavy curtains. I mean, you go in there and it feels dark, but what it is it's almost deafening. It absorbs the sound.
Yeah. That is a great point. I don't think I realized that, but it is, of course, they're trying to create kind of like a cozy, intimate vibe as well. But the part of that is the fact that you can hear the person who's sitting across from you or next to you. So
yeah, a lot of the fast food restaurants don't invest in that for obvious reasons. I mean, a lot of people are in and out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Burrard. You said Burrard AIT, that's how you shorten it. And I wanted to hit on the Buffalo model as well, and I think we'll get to that by way of our next question here. So how is it that the auditory integration training fits alongside like traditional speech and language therapy? And, we have a lot of kids that will come that need maybe articulation as well as other like reading interventions. So how do you fit the auditory portions alongside like artic and all those fun other things?
Similarly to how you guys will pair articulation intervention and reading, literacy intervention, we will often combine Burrard AIT and typical speech and language intervention, or we have clients that can't commit to the 10 days for whatever reason. And so they want to start with just regular speech and intervention. So one big thing that we'll do is we will sometimes we'll prime their auditory system at the beginning of their session. So the first, 10, sometimes even 15 minutes of their session will focus on auditory memory or auditory discrimination to kind of sharpen the skills. Yeah. We might have them listen to absurdities in sentences. We might do multiple step directions. We might do auditory discrimination. And again, a lot of these are our literacy kids as well. So we can pair that with some of our Orton Gillingham OG training. And then this is where we also might implement the Buffalo model. So during sessions after AIT, we may pull in pieces from that. So what we do for the Buffalo model, there are 3 main parts. So there's the phonemic training program, which is kind of similar to some things from OG. So there are cards with the letter printed on it, and we talk about the corresponding letter sounds. There's also phonemic synthesis. So this is a wider range of speech sounds, and the Buffalo model is set up. It essentially has programmed lessons, whereas Burrard AIT, we individualize. This part of the Buffalo model is pretty structured. And so it goes through these 15 lessons that start off very easily and they increase as you go through.
Right.
And then the third part is words and noise. So like Kim was saying, when we do the testing, we look at dichotic listening. So listening to competing speech, and sometimes competing speech, sometimes speech and noise. The words and noise part is having these clients pull speech out of a background. So there are recorded words, and it's, again, pretty structured to have them pull that the speech information out of that background noise.
Wow, that's very cool. And I'm sure like probably frustrating for people at first, because I can only imagine like having to sit there and be like, what am I supposed to be hearing? But as someone who like loves sound, I'm a music person, I'm a singer. And so this is like such an interesting little like training that sounds like it would be fun as someone who likes to work with audio. But like I said, I can imagine it being like slightly frustrating for people when they first start.
Yeah, and it is so detailed that, like, for example, if we're doing absurdities in sentences, we're not saying there is a tall car outside. It's green. It has leaves. We actually give a similar word with one phoneme change. So we might say the car drove on the board.
Oh my gosh.
And they not only have to tell us what sound is wrong, but how to change it. What sound is changed to make it correct.
Wow.
Either
Are people
phonemic
tired?
deletion. Oh my gosh, yes. And when as Rachel is going through this, if you have a child with a 45-minute session, even an adult, actually, I shouldn't be specific. You're not spending the entire 45 minutes on that. You're
Right.
max 15 minutes.
Okay.
Because
Wow.
you'll never get anything out of them after that.
When we do testing,
Yeah.
we do the scan 3, it's recorded voices. And I I had a client who referred to it as the man. And when it finished, she was like, do I ever have to listen to the man again? It was just so frustrating. And it was that dichotic listening piece. There's a part that's competing words and a part that's competing sentences. And
Okay.
I was so frustrated by having to pull that information out.
But the kids know. That's what's fascinating to us. We had a 5-year-old come in last year, and just the whole body language changes. When we were doing the right ear, she would be like, yeah, here we go. And just be kind of almost dancing and have no problem. The minute we would say, okay, now we're going to do the left ear, she would go dark and she'd say, this is going to be hard. And the parents were just blown away. They're like, I've never seen her. And Rachel and I will often finish the testing and say, what did you guys think? What did you think? Was this hard? And a lot of times the kids will go, well, some of it. And we'll say, okay, well, what did you think was hard? And they will pull it out and they'll tell you the exact what was hard and why. And then we'll say to them, do you ever experience this in school or at home?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah. And the parents will be shocked, like, because they would have no idea.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. Like, you realize how much kids instinctively like trust and know their own body more than you realize.
Completely.
And I feel like you guys realize that a lot.
Yes. I mean, you watch, they'll start wanting to hold on to the headphones. They'll start fidgeting.
Or they'll pull one headphone away so that they can isolate. Yes.
Or press one into their ear to try to listen. I mean, it's fascinating. The number of kids that have come out and said, it was really hard in my right ear. And we've had the parents following along. We'll give them a copy of the protocol so they can follow along and listen to what words that the child was supposed to say. And pretty much every time they have correctly identified what area was hard for them. It's fascinating. But like you said, they are exhausted. By the end of the test, they are yawning. We have had, especially littler kids, while we're reviewing the results with the parents, we've had kids lay their head down on the table, like they're. So it's just more evidence to how tiring just their entire day is trying to process.
Exactly. Yeah.
I will add one more piece to this too. When a student or an adult are going through the auditory processing treatment of AIT, it has been mind-boggling to us. Day 5, the peak day, is usually the hardest. And it is mind-boggling to us, the kiddos who will be completely overstimulated or completely just at their wits' end with the process, because again, it's the peak day. And they will be so upset about it, but yet not take off the headphones once.
Really?
It is completely mind-boggling to me. Like, as an adult, right? If we don't like something, our first thing is to move away from it.
Absolutely.
Like, just get up and leave, right?
Yes.
These kids can be sitting there having a complete meltdown, screaming, and not once take off the headphones.
Wow. And do you think it's because they know they're going to feel relief?
We really cannot figure it out.
I don't know that they actually realize that it is, I mean, I could be totally off here, but I don't know that they realize that that is what is causing them to feel that way. Usually they're attributing it to something external. We will let them have a small fidget. And so it's usually like the fidget falls, or they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing with the fidget and they're making noise. And so the parent might take it away. We have the parent sit next to them. The parent might take it away, and that causes it. I don't know that they, at that point,
make that connection. That's a good point.
That's my thought. But we actually will try to schedule day 5. I usually recommend starting on a Tuesday because then day 5
Oh,
is on a Saturday, and typically they can be at home. And we have
right.
some clients that we say, I think maybe you should wait until spring break or the summer because
They're going to need recovery time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in adults, we can see something very similar. We had an executive of a company go through the program, and he was really just worked up. And
Wow.
we had to call his wife and say, whatever you do, don't let him go in the office.
Yeah.
Because he was just worked up. He was talking about firing people, and we're like, whatever you do,
Ooh,
don't let him go in the
don't.
office. And I'm like, hide his keys, put him in the freezer, do something, but do not let him go in the office. And she was like, okay. We've had kids that were barely speaking all of a sudden start coming out with 3-word phrases.
Oh my gosh.
And it is really, I would love to tell you why, but for
Right.
each person, the results are different. It is very qualitative
Wow.
data, not quantitative.
we had I think it was last summer or the summer before, and the mom came in and was in tears, and she said, my kids did not fight the entire day yesterday. And that was the
Oh my
first
gosh.
ever. And it was the oldest child that was going through the program, and
Yeah.
she had 2 younger siblings that must have been auditorily overstimulating her. And they had spent that whole day together the day before. It's very different for each child and adult.
Wow.
And adult, yeah.
Oh my
The nurse I
goodness.
was telling you about, who went through the training,
Yeah.
her supervisor, the one whose schedule she was attached to, asked her, she was on day 7, asked her what she had been doing different, because she had
Really?
noticed a marked difference in her ability to locate sound, interpret directions. This person, besides the 10-day training, we often reschedule them at the 6-month mark to come back to take a
Yeah.
look at their audiogram to make sure that the scores are staying consistent. And then
Yeah.
again at the 1-year mark. And that's all part of the cost of it. And then if they call us up and they say, can I get checked? I'm a little concerned. We always do it for
Yeah.
free.
Oh,
This
that's
nurse
awesome.
recently came back after 3 years, I think it was, because
Wow.
she had done it during the COVID times.
Yeah.
She decided that she could not work in the modern hospitals because the
Oh.
sound was too bouncy.
Mm.
So she went to a hospital that had brick buildings, that it was in Georgetown, that happened to absorb
Yeah.
sound better for her.
Oh my gosh, how crazy. And you don't of course you think of sound in your everyday life, but you don't realize how much little things can affect what you're hearing and how you're processing it. So
For
how
sure.
cool. So in the classroom for kids, how might the auditory processing challenges show up for those kids? And what are the things that you can, kind of give parents to provide to the teachers for different strategies, different accommodations that might help kids in the classroom?
I think we can tackle this one together because we see a myriad of different things. But in the classroom, this is usually our child who's just kind of zoned out, not paying attention. Noisy environments, not following directions. The classic age is 2nd or 3rd grade, because prior to that, a classroom is very visual. So you have your schedules up, you have teachers pointing to different things. But once you get into 2nd grade, things start to fall off. And that also is in conjunction with the academics as well. As you were saying, you go from learning to read to reading to learn. And so books become less visual. There are less pictures. And so to then take all that information and having to pull it together and actually then apply it to writing or critical thinking,
Right.
they just get overwhelmed between loud settings. They get distracted. And it really looks like they're just not paying attention. And I often tell parents, it'd be no different than if I took an English speaker and put them in a room with people all speaking Russian.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to zone out thinking, I don't know what they're saying. But there'll be key words that will show up. Like you'll hear your name and you'll be like, what?
Wow.
And that's what's happening with these students.
Just becomes background noise.
Completely. It's just like white noise. For adults, it's super interesting. They almost pinpoint it every time. They know exactly what conditions are bothering them.
Wow.
We've had many adults say, I go to a party and I stand in the corner because I just can't do the group conversations. And, they'll say to us, we thought it was our pragmatic skills. We thought we weren't able to make friends.
Right.
And it's really interesting is adults will go into professions that are very predictable and with less people interventions and like accounting.
Yeah.
They'll choose sports that are one-on-one, like tennis.
Oh, yeah.
The parents will tell us of kids, we put them on the soccer field and they start crying because they can't figure out who's talking, like if the coach is yelling at them or if it's another player saying, pass me the ball.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. As far as the phonics, we always focus on visual cues. We focus on motor movements and, of course, any vibratory sounds or non-vibratory sounds to help them decipher which sound is being said or spoken.
Right.
Classic recommendations we have for children are smaller classroom settings. It makes it easier for them to see what is happening. Multisensory supports, visual schedules, even for the older students, even if it's teaching them to make their own schedule. And more importantly, quiet environments for testing. And that's not self-advocacy to say, I have an accommodation, but for teachers to pull them out or to sit away from the door.
Oh, good point.
Just so they don't have the outdoor hallway noise interrupting with them.
Right.
We also ask teachers to break tasks into small chunks and to check in with the students that they do understand. Something as basic as saying, can you tell me what you're supposed to do for homework?
Or, hey, so-and-so, I'm going to call on you next. And then you call on another student. So giving them that heads up that, hey, you are going to have to answer this question. A lot of times these are the kids that have, as Kim said, zoned out. And so that gives them to come back in and then.
Wow.
And for the adults, we've talked a little bit about this. The round tables, the booths, the restaurants with more cushioning so that the sound is absorbed. We had a judge come through. I can't remember how old he was, Rachel, 70. And he actually changed his courtroom environment because he wasn't able to. I mean, you know what a courtroom looks like. It's open, it's loud, it's a lot of heavy wood. He was having a real difficult time. He thought it was a hearing loss. And he actually has a hearing loss, but it was more than that. So he put rugs in his courtroom.
Oh, that's genius.
And he had people start wearing microphones.
That's very smart.
But he was one of the first ones that did. I don't know if anyone else does it, but he was like, I don't even work full time anymore. But how do you make a judgment on something if you're not processing everything you hear?
Of course. Yeah. You got to make sure you can do your job to the best of your abilities. And same thing with the kid in the classroom. You want to be able to hear and process and make sure you know what's going on. So some of these things just feel so small, but so impactful.
I'm glad you said that because it's things that are kind of obvious once you say them.
Yeah.
But not so much. And going back to Rachel's point of individualization, that nurse we talked to, we briefly said, is there anything besides ICU? Because that's a life and death situation. And she was like, no, I really enjoy it. Let's do AIT. Let's see if it makes a difference. Let's change your environment.
Yeah.
Thank God it did. The teacher, the instructional aide I was just discussing, we discussed her changing grade levels.
Yeah.
And in order to manage a smaller classroom, you might have to go to special ed. Absolutely. Because then there'll be fewer students in there. Those students will also be at a slower pace to be able to get the information in because you might have to repeat it for them. So that would help you. We also talked about what teacher you would be assigned to. You might want to consider closing the proximity between you and that teacher or asking, can you give me your lesson plan?
Right.
In terms of the classroom, too, we have a partnership with Oakwood School, and the teachers ask us to come into the classroom. And a lot of, again, like I said, one day there will be a link between these dyslexia and auditory processing
Oh,
needs
yeah.
and ear dominance. They will call us into the classroom and say, we have like 3 or 4 kids in here with auditory processing needs. What do you recommend? And so I have helped teachers rearrange the desks. Like, hey, this student makes a lot of noise, just fidgeting or whispering or whatever. So let's
Yeah.
not put our auditory processing students within that vicinity because that's what they'll be focused on. So again, that individualization, maybe being at the front middle of the classroom where someone might think might not actually always be appropriate if that's near the door or if that's near somebody who's making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Able to really help teachers figure out where these kids will sit. And Kim and I will attend IEPs for our public school students. We have had phone calls with teachers from other schools. And we're able to talk through what might support some of these kiddos and what they actually need in their school day to be successful.
Yeah.
We started a collaboration with a Catholic school, and there are 2 students that we provided auditory processing tests. Both of them failed, and the PE teacher came to me recently. Think of a gym, how cacophonous it is.
Woo, yes.
And he was telling me that one of these little guys, 2nd grade, he was doing this game with him. He was up on a ladder.
Okay.
So he's talking down, but yet bouncy sound everywhere. And he was having an opposite game. So he would yell to the classroom of 30 students, right?
Oh, no.
And all the kids would have to go left. And on the second command, this little guy said, I'm out.
Yeah.
And the teacher was like thinking he was being just objectionable, like not even like, so the teacher says, okay, fine. Lets him go sit down. Tried it again, didn't work. Calls up the mom. The mom says, well, we just had this testing done. And by the way, maybe you want to talk to Kim Hiday.
Yeah.
So he tracks me down, to his credit. And he said, I really just thought he was just being rude and didn't want to participate. I said, no. He said, what can I do next time? And I said, well, again, if we think about chunking the information, maybe you have him participate with 2 things and then have him call out some commands.
Ooh, yeah.
And I said, and that would show you whether he understands the concept that you're teaching.
Right.
And he goes, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So, it's the little tweaks that can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. That is so cool. And the classroom seating thing feels like magic to me. Like, and for you guys to be able to sit in there and like really notice like the nuance of like, okay, well, this kid's a little fidgety and like this might be like causing a bit more noise than like, again, like you said, it's very small things that seem obvious, but you don't always realize them. So I think that is so cool. So
it's fun. It's fun. No.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. And like I had mentioned before, like I was a choir nerd. And so I always thought like the coolest thing was a little bit different, but like putting people next to each other who have like good blends, right? And like the magic of a director who can hear that, I think is insane. And so that felt very similar to me, right? Like you've got the ear to know like these kids are going to be well suited to sit next to each other or need to be further apart. But how crazy.
Yeah.
There is one classroom where there's one extra desk. And so I was like, I think we should put the extra desk here. And it looks like it's in a really odd place, but it is very strategic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine as a kid being like, this is bizarre, but like you do not realize someone came in here and very intentionally put all of these desks in these places. So like you can question it, but don't move it around. Don't touch this.
Well, and COVID taught us so many things, but talk about a challenge during COVID, all the air purifiers.
Oh my gosh.
It was, we not only had windows open, so you're getting a lot of noise from the outside, you had air purifiers, you had masks.
Yes.
All of it was just wreaking havoc on our students with auditory processing disorders.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Never mind the Zoom.
Right. Yeah. And did you end up having to tell people like, is having one headphone on better than having another, like both in some cases, or is it always both should be on? Wow.
Both. Yeah. Just because it zooms in the sound.
Yeah.
But again, if you think of yourself as a student sitting on Zoom for 7 hours,
No. I'm all right.
people often say, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner. Well, technically, no one is one of either or
Right.
many of them. It just depends what you're learning.
Yeah.
However, to learn everything for 7 hours auditorily, that's a
It's a
lot.
lot.
But you made a great point with the headphones. We don't recommend one on, one off, but we do recommend over the ear or open ear. So I just bought a pair myself. They sell them at the running stores. They now have them kind of like AirPods, but it allows sound transmission. That way you are actually listening to your entire environment. We will encourage bone conduction headphones. After AIT, it is a requirement. But for everybody, it's actually really good to be able to practice processing sound and noise. Noise canceling headphones block out everything, which in theory sounds great, but you're actually, depending on what your job is, dampening your ability to discriminate all the time. So that was actually a really good question. But headphones are designed to put sound into your ears in a certain way. So you notice like sometimes you hear some things louder in one than the other. So we try to encourage both, but getting those open air ones are really helpful.
And when you say open air, what do you mean?
If you look it up, it says open air or it says open, but essentially it allows sound transmission from the outside. So like,
and instead of it being a closed headphone, it has a mesh on the outside that allows other sounds to come in. And the bone conduction obviously is through bone conduction over the ear. So there's nothing to occlude your inner ear.
Wow.
The ones I got almost, they like cuff on, but they don't actually go in your ear. So it's putting the sound out into the open. So I like to run. And when I run outside, it's a safer way to run because I have cars and people around me, but it's also better for you in terms of auditory processing.
I'm always aghast when I'm driving down the road and I either see somebody with headphones on driving or headphones on walking or running or biking. And I'm thinking, you're going to get hit by a car.
Right. Yeah. It's scary.
It is.
This is my last tangent I'll go on because I know we've been here for a bit, but I'm having a great time. Have you guys seen the Loops headsets, like the little noise canceling things? Are they helpful to people in certain environments? Like, what do you think of them?
Yes and no. So Loop has a couple of different kinds. Loop has some that block out all of the sound. We are pretty big on not doing that. Now, in terms of hearing protection, yes, block out some of the sound. Loop has, I want to say, 3 different levels of like the amount of sound that it blocks out.
Sure.
We'll say if you need it, go for one of the lower ones because you don't want to take away your natural ability to handle loud sounds or to be able to discriminate sound in environments.
Right.
But noise canceling, we're pretty
negative. Yeah.
Anti. Wow. How interesting.
If you walk around with a noise canceling headphone, you take it off, everything is going to sound amplified.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've just gone from a library to a gym, so to speak, as far as sound intensity.
Yeah, and you'll worsen your sensitivity over time. If you're continuously using noise canceling headphones, you will actually make any sensitivity that you have worse. So we will tell people if that's what they're using, reduce the amount. Don't go cold turkey, take them off, but try to reduce the use until you no longer rely on it and then only use sound dampening for hearing protection.
Wow. I'm learning, again, like I said, I'm learning so much. And as a person who loves sound, this is very interesting to me. But my last question for you guys, if a parent, suspects their child might have auditory processing challenges, what do you recommend as their first step?
That's a really good question. The biggest thing is nothing needs to be figured out right away. You're going to want to get together a good team, gather a lot of information. Usually we'll tell people to start with a hearing test. If they come to us, like Kim was saying, that's part of our testing process.
Yeah.
Or go to an audiologist, rule out any hearing concerns. From there, gather background information. So talk to their teachers if it's a child, consult family, friends for adults, coworkers. We've already said what it looks like in those environments, but once you start to hear some of those red flags, then you're thinking, okay, it might be auditory processing. Give us a call. Happy to chat through the process. We're happy to make recommendations, even if that looks like us doing an assessment to determine needs, or if somebody, like I said, we will tell them, do you need a formal diagnosis for any? If so, we'll support them in finding where they can go to get that. If they want to know, is there a deficit and what can we do about it? We'll bring them on in testing and help figure out a
Awesome. And I like that you mentioned, like getting to your community and like asking them questions and seeking them first. That has been a theme on the last couple episodes that we have done on the podcast here. And I just very much appreciate it because sometimes you don't think about like free resources that you have to get to have like the information gathering portion of figuring out what's going on. So yeah. Well, that was, like I said, that's my last question for you, but this has been fantastic. Kim, Rachel, do you have any last minute things you want to add?
No, thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. We've enjoyed our time as well.
Good. This has been fabulous. I've learned a lot. I am sure the audience has learned a lot, and you've let me, be a nerd here and asking so many questions and just enjoying our time. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to the audience for listening. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a little rating and review. It helps other folks find the podcast, and we'll chat with you next time.